Who was Richard Oakes?
Richard Oakes, he's the one that led the thing on Alcatraz. He was the one, the main leader when we took Alcatraz in 1969.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
So anyway, he called me over and we got to talking. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to a leadership training program." He said, "You see Berkeley?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, we're having a big rally over there, man." He said, "Why don't you come out? Check it out." So I went over and I met a bunch of people that were getting ready to go out to Alcatraz, take over the island. And under the 1968 Laramie Treaty, which stated that any unused federal land would revert back to the Indian. And under that treaty, we claimed Alcatraz, and it was...
Because the prison there had been decommissioned or something, and it wasn't being used?
In 1963, they shut the prison down after that, they escaped. And it was getting too costly. The whole prison's falling apart.
Yeah.
So anyway...
So they hadn't used the land for 5 years?
No.
Okay.
It'd been shut down. I mean, the city of San Francisco actually had title to it at that time, and then they sold it to, they were going to sell it to the Hunt brothers, oil people.
Oh.
And we found out about it, and the Indian Center had just burned it down in San Francisco, and we were talking about taking Alcatraz the following year, so everything got pushed up. All the plans got pushed up, so we all got together and we had, try to figure logistics, how we're going to get out there, all this other stuff.
But you thought you had a legal right to it because there was a treaty saying that unused lands would go back to Native Americans.
Right.
Okay.
But it still was posted as federal land, and they had signs on it, you trespass and you're subject to federal law enforcement. So anyway, and they got Charles Finley from the Chronicle, from the newspaper, told him about it, and he started hanging around, listening to stuff, and he had a bunch of friends out in Sausalito that had boats.
They had what, sorry?
Boats.
Boats?
They'd have boats to get to Alcatraz. So we had no boats.
Okay.
We're just a bunch of Indians, how we don't get out there,
So there were no bridges or
there's no
roads?
bridges to Alcatraz.
Right, okay.
It's right in the middle of...
Right, there are no bridges or roads, yeah. Okay.
So, anyway, when we got out there, we had Adam, Fortune Eagle, Richard, and Joe Beal. He was Alouette from Alaska, and Dennis Hastings. Went and talked to him, and then they said, "We got some friends," and so they went to a bar in Sausalito called the No Name Bar, and a guy named Peter Bowen owned the bar and ran the bar, and he was kind of a half hippie kind of guy, not too stringent and stuff. And all the people that hung around, there's a lot of boat. At that time, there's a lot of people living on houseboats right there on that whole area. And they weren't up to, they weren't up to code. People just put a little shack on a houseboat or got a flat platform, build a house, and they were out there. They had no sewage, and dumping all that and stuff in the bay and stuff too. But so was Alcatraz. Alcatraz never had any sewage. They dumped all that shit right in the bay. For all that prison, all these years, military prison, all that stuff went right straight in the bay. We didn't know that until we got there. But anyway, so right about then was when we went over, and they decided, well, they were going to try to get this guy, and Ross Hardin was another one of the guys that went out there. He got a hold of one of them. They talked, and he said, "Well, come over to the bar, and we'll talk." So anyway, bring whoever's going to go out there with you. And so they took about 4 people out there, and they talked a little bit, and they said, "Well, how many people do you think you're going to have?" Probably maybe about 60. 60, and said, okay, so they planned for 60 people, so they arranged 3 boats. So the following 2 days after that, called up and said, we're good to go. So we went up there, probably started getting there Sausalito probably about maybe 10 o'clock at night. And then there's about 93 total people that showed up to
all Native Americans?
All Native Americans.
From all over the country?
From all over. They came from everywhere. They came from Los Angeles, from Colorado, from Montana, Washington, Idaho. I mean, they came from everywhere. That's why it's called Indians of all tribes. So anyway, all of them showed up, and the first occupation, 13 people got on board. They made it to Alcatraz. Before the guy said, "Oh man, you guys are going to get me arrested," and he pulled off and left them. So he left those 13 on the island, but they had enough supplies, and the Coast Guard came the following day and told them they had to leave the island and stuff. And they said, "Well, we already claimed the island. If you guys can claim Manhattan Island for this much, and blah blah. We're claiming this under those same rules. So that was laid, and right away, the whole.
Were you among the first 13?
No,
No.
I was on the boat, but I didn't get
Okay.
off.
Okay.
There were 17 of us on the boat. 4 of us didn't get off before they got pulled off. We were on the back side.
You got pulled off by whom?
The guy that owned the boat,
Why did he leave?
because the Coast Guard
Oh, because the Coast Guard came.
came
Okay.
and flashed the light and said,
Okay.
"You better stop whatever you're doing. You're subject to, So he pulled out,
Okay.
broke the rope and everything. Never came back. Chickened out after that. I can't blame the guy who took his boat, his livelihood.
Yeah.
So, but the next day, all the federal people showed up, federal marshals and all of these other people, and they're all loaded up with guns and ready to take everybody out. But Nixon was going through the Watergate years. You remember anything about that?
Yeah.
And he was going through that. He didn't want to create another big scene, was what it was. And he didn't want to mess with the Indians. Plus, and when he was in high school, he had an Indian coach, so he had a soft spot for Indians. And he said, no, he said, right now, just let them stay. Don't do nothing, just let them stay. So they called the Coast Guard off, and the Garment, this guy named Garment from the Interior Department, Leonard Garment, and
But there were only 13 of them there.
yeah.
Okay.
But it was just the precedent that we're setting,
Okay.
So anyway, they came out and they met with them and they said, okay, well, we'll leave, but we'll be back. So everybody that was there left. The 15, that's what we call them, the original 14, actually 15 people that got on there. One guy never got counted, and he became the head security guard out there, so I know he was there. But anyway, all of those people left the following day. And that same night, the calls had gone out, the smoke signals, kind of like people, that's all we had. Didn't have no phones and stuff back then. Didn't have cameras, so a lot of stuff wasn't even recorded. Stuff like this wasn't, so at that time, we came back. We went that same night we went back to Sausalito and got on the boats. And Peter Bone had 33 people on his boat. Mary Crowley was. Her people owned a bunch of tugboats out on the bay at one time. She came from money, but she was kind of like she was pretty cool.
And it's too dangerous to go out on a canoe to Alcatraz?
Well, we didn't know nobody had canoes. We didn't know too much about canoes.
Oh,
we didn't know a lot of Indian stuff back then yet.
Oh,
we
I
didn't
see.
even know who was Indian in California.
Oh.
Most of us didn't even know who. We just knew that we were here.
Okay.
We had met at the Indian centers, at different powwows and stuff, and talked about stuff.
Because yesterday I spoke to a Muwekma person, Joey, and he said that the Miwoks still had a lot of their traditions still alive in the slightly north from here.
Yeah.
So they have canoes and...
Yeah, but they weren't using the canoes. A lot of them weren't using their canoes.
Oh, I see.
Nobody was. A lot of them. The only ones that were.
So they hadn't reawakened those traditions again.
Yeah, they were still there, but they weren't being used.
Okay.
Alcatraz was kind of like the spark.
The first kind of...
It relit the whole Indian movement.
I see, okay.
Everybody gives that credit because everybody they seen that and they started. See, in Alcatraz, it only lasted a little over a year, 18 months. I was there 3 months. I didn't stay the full.
You occupied it for a whole 18 months?
Yeah, there was people there 18 months.
Okay.
A lot of them. And toward the end, it was a lot of chaos was going on, a lot of other stuff. But a lot of people said that Alcatraz hadn't succeeded, but it did succeed because after 18 months, the people that were there, while they were there, went to Pitt River, they went to the Pueblos, they went to Idaho, they went everywhere there was an Indian tribe and organized. They went to the fishing rights, they went to fishing, up in Washington. All that stuff was happening. We
So
supported
it
all
seeded
that.
the resistance across the country.
Everybody started coming together, and all of them, and all of us supporting each other, kind of like, There was no casinos back in those days either, so that money wasn't there. That happened later, but all of that